have to leave this meeting for an agenda item. Okay, are we ready to proceed, Corporate Officer?
Item.
Yes, you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole agenda for the town of Gibsons for July 6, 2021. We acknowledge that we're meeting today on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We have a fairly full agenda for this afternoon, so we're going to go right into it. I'll call the meeting to order, time being 3:03, and call for a motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Kroll, Councillor Diandrat, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. We'll go into reports, and right at the offset, I'm going to recuse myself from item 3.1, which is a zoning amendment for 303 Gibsons Way, as my wife and I own an apartment in that particular building. So I will not be able to participate in the discussion. So I think they've got a place for me to go and hide.
I will be moving you over into a wait room.
Thank you.
And Councillor Diandratti.
Sorry, I was muted. Councillor Ledwig, please.
Thank you. And I will be recusing myself as well because I live across the street at 702 Gibsons Way.
Thank you, Councillor Ledwig.
Thank you. So I'll take over from here as the Deputy Mayor. The next report, 3.1, is zoning amendment for 703 Gibsons Way. And I would like to turn now to the planner too.
Thank you very much, Councillor Diandratti. I'm going to share my screen. I have a really quick presentation to introduce this application. Now, can you see my?
Yes, we can.
You can see it?
Yeah. Yes, now it's full screen. Thank you.
It's full screen? Okay,
Yes.
great. Okay, so the town of Gibsons received an application for the zoning amendment for the property at 703 Gibsons Way. And you can see that it's outlined in the blue in the map below. The property contains one two-story building with 6 units in total. So we've got 3 units on the ground floor that are currently used for commercial purposes. And then we have 3 units on the second floor that are for residential use. The property itself is zoned Upper Gibsons Commercial District 1, which is C1, which permits commercial use at grade or on the ground level and allows for apartment use above. So the applicants would like to change the zoning from C1 to a new zone, which would be Live Work 2, and that would essentially rezone the entire building. Now, the applicant has stated that the commercial units on the ground floor have been very difficult to tenant. So they have one unit that is used as a business. It's the Black Swan Tattoo Studio, and the other 2 have been left vacant for a long time, I think over 2 years. So their idea is that they would propose to renovate one of the units to become a residential unit, which would be attached to the existing tattoo studio, and the remaining unit would become a live work unit. So it would be able to have both residential and commercial uses. So the zoning amendment looks to change the zoning. And as you can see from the left-hand map, the properties surrounding the subject property are zoned for commercial use. Now, in the map on the right-hand side, you've got the OCP designation map, and the purple is the live work designation. You've got medium density residential to the north, which is multifamily townhouse apartment styles. And then you have detached residential towards the south, and that's for single family. So the idea is that the new Live Work 2 zone has been drafted to apply to the existing buildings that are designated as live work under the OCP. And these properties are focused around the Weingart and the Gibsons Way kind of intersection. Now, we do have an existing live work zone, which was created when 1000 Venture Way was developed. And this focuses more on industrial uses. And so we've decided that the Live Work 2 zone would apply to existing buildings, and there'd be a main difference in that there'd be limited principal uses. So we're looking more at commercial uses that would be compatible with detached residential around them. So we're looking at more quiet uses, as it were. So the OCP provides support for the rezoning of the subject property. So we've got policies 10.2.4 and 10.2.5, which are in your staff report. And they both speak to minimizing or preventing the dispersal of commercial activity along the sections of Gibsons Way east of School Road by limiting the commercial development to areas designated in the OCP as mixed-use commercial. So that's the red blob that you see on my map on the right-hand side, as well as supporting the redevelopment of existing commercially zoned properties on Gibsons Way, east of School Road, to multi-unit housing or live-work uses, which provide for small-scale shops and services that clearly benefit the surrounding residential neighborhood. So the proposal was sent to the following agencies, and there have been no concerns regarding the change to the zoning. As you can see, from a finance point of view, there would be a change to the property assessment classification from commercial class 6 to residential class 1. So it would mean that the property is taxed at a lower rate. And then from utility billing, if a commercial unit is switched to a residential unit, they would have to reconfigure the utility billing to allow it to be billed as a residential unit. In terms of a zoning bylaw amendment, to be adopted, we have to go through the following steps: first and second reading, public hearing, third reading, sign off from the Ministry of Transportation because we're within 800 meters of the highway, and then adoption. Now the bylaw can be defeated at any time. So we are right at the beginning of this process. And so staff recommend that the bylaw be given first and second readings tonight, and that a public hearing be scheduled for July the 20th, which would be in 2 weeks, starting at 6 p.m. And that's so that we can do this, the public hearing before council breaks for August. So the recommendations are listed here, and they're on page 1 of the staff report too. Now we have Michelle Havig is representing the strata, and she's available to answer any questions that I can't answer. Michelle owns the Black Swan Tattoo Studio, and she would be purchasing one of the commercial units to renovate it into that residential suite. So if you have any questions for her, she'll be available to answer them. So I will stop my screen share right now.
Thank you, Katie. It was great. So over to you, Council. Any comments, questions at this point? Councilor Crowe, please.
Thank you. Thank you. This would be a question for probably the Director of Finance. What would be the financial implication of just the difference in revenue between residential and commercial for the property?
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. So the change is from a class 6 down to class 1. So if you remember, class 6 is billed or charged at 2.75, the rate of a class 1. And it would depend on what BC assessment chose to, what portion BC assessment chose to assess as residential versus commercial in a live work unit. So can't really determine the amount that's going to be the effect, but it would be resulting from whatever change in classification BC assessment made after any changes were made to the use of the property.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Councillor Lumley, please.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I just had a question, like when you rezone an area for like live work, it doesn't necessarily, like, I mean, I guess I always thought that a live work would be that you'd live and work in out of a certain area within a building, but live work means that you can have like businesses and residents all living together in the same building. Is that, and is it like a 50-50 thing, or does it matter? Does it have a ratio?
There's no ratio. So the existing live work zone that we have in our zoning bylaw right now looks at having apartment use above the ground floor, and it's intended that you would have like active frontage on the ground floor, whereas this zone allows for both residential and kind of live work units on the ground floor or the second floor. So that's kind of the main difference here. The other difference is that the permitted uses are much more focused around like the commercial aspect. So you can have retail, you could have like service commercial, so you could have your tattoo parlor or your hairdressing, but you couldn't have, say, a rock climbing gym or a welding shop, if that makes any sense. So I guess the answer to your question is that there isn't like one focused area on the property that needs to be business.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lumley. And Katie, just on that note, I understand that the area is around 1,000 square meters, I believe. But if someone, for example, a hairdresser wants to have their salon and live in the same space, is it possible?
Yeah, so there's no minimum size for your business or for your apartment. So it depends on how big your unit is. And so, for instance, you could have perhaps one room would be for your business, for your hairdressing, and then you could use the rest of the unit for residential use.
Okay, Councillor Crowe.
And this is just a comment more than anything else. The building across the street on Weingarten, which for years was the DeVries building, it in fact was a live-work building. The DeVries family lived in the building. There were rental units, and they had their carpet business on the main floor. So, you know, I think it's something that complements the area, as long as it's, you know, as you say, it's not an invasive business. It's, you know, going to cause ludicrous traffic problems or parking problems. So I think it just, you know, it gives us a little more flexibility in the rental market to allow, you know, combinations of things rather than a small business having to pay rent on a commercial space and then be looking for a place to live. It affords them, you know, being able to open a business and sort of have the option of living there. So I think it's a definite plus.
Mm-hmm. Any other comment or question? So what I would do, I'll read, there are three recommendations. I'll read each of them and we vote. So the first one, and that's zoning amendment by law number 1065-61, 2021, be forwarded to council for first and second reading. So, Councillor, I think it's all approved. Thank you. The second recommendation would be in that an electronic public hearing be scheduled to begin at 6 p.m. on July 20, 2021, as authorized under Ministerial Order M192/2020. All in favor? Thank you. And the last one is further that these recommendations be forwarded to the July 6, 2021 council meeting for adoption. All in favor? Thank you. It's approved. Corporate Officer, please.
Yes, I usually you would have a mover and a seconder. Do we have a mover and a
Oh.
seconder? It's okay.
You're so,
That's okay.
I haven't done this for a while and
That's
we are
okay.
only.
Even those of us who've done it many times make that mistake.
Okay, so I'll start. Do I have to repeat all of them or can I say resolution, recommendation number, first one?
I think you could probably get a mover and a seconder for all those recommendations at once.
Okay, so I'll have Councilor Crowe and as a mover and Councilor Longley as a second. Thank you. So I think it's all approved. And I think we can invite Mayor Beamish back to the table and Councilor Ledwick.
Give them a moment to make their way back.
Rebecca says I can't start my video. Okay. Okay, there. Good. Back. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor DeAndrade.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Get you to do the same thing tonight at a council meeting.
It's a good training. I need it. I forgot some steps already.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll go on now to section reports under 3.2, and this is the 2020-2023 permissive property tax exemption and confirmation of use for 2022. The Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mayor. So this report relates to bylaw 1273, which was authorized permissive property tax exemptions for 15 properties, and it covers a 4-year period of 2020 through 2023 taxation years. And so I don't know if you remember when multi-year exemptions are granted, we confirm annually with the property owners that the property's use remains consistent with the use that was listed on the original application. And so we've done that process again this year, and this annual review in the past, it's always also provided opportunity for owners to make additional requests for additional exemptions. So we sent out the letters or the letter of confirmation forms to the owners who received either partial or full exemptions, and that list is shown on page 2 of my report. We received all confirmations back, and all the use is consistent with the original application, and there was no request from those who have a partial for any extension of any addition of an exemption. And so as a result, there's no changes to the bylaw required. We would only need to change the bylaw if a property was sold and was no longer exempt, or if a new property was coming on, or if there was a change in existing exemption. So there's no bylaw changes this year as a result. And so this bylaw covers the 4-year term, and this ends with the 2023 taxation year. And so we're going to have one more annual confirmation next year, and we always do it the year sort of preceding the taxation year it applies to. So next year will be the final annual confirmation, and then in 2023 we'll have a full intake of applications and evaluation, and that will match the new council's term of office. So that's why we have the 4-year term. So at this point, the report is being presented just for information purposes, and of course, if council or committee has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Finance. Councilor, do you have any questions with respect to the report? Councilor Ledwick?
So does this mean that properties can't be added until 2023?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, properties could be added if we had another, there are quite limited criteria as to which properties are eligible to be permissively exempt, but properties could be added. And every year, I haven't received any requests from properties yet this year at this point. And the deadline for any changes to the bylaw has to be fully adopted by October 31st in order to take effect for the 2022 taxation year. So no requests have been made.
So I was thinking of the Franklin Road affordable housing project. I don't know where council sits on that type of property, but it occurred to me when I looked at this list. I was curious about it.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Please go ahead.
I would have to look at the lease on on that property. I believe there is a clause in the lease agreement that that property pays full taxes, even if they are deemed to be exempt for any reason.
Hmm.
It's, yeah, often leases override certain taxation, right? So,
We set the lease, right?
yes.
Maybe something to be evaluated.
Thank you. Councillor Kroll?
With respect to Councillor Ladwig's thing, would that have anything to do with the fact that they're not a registered charity?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would have to dig a bit deeper into that one as to, I wasn't involved in the lease arrangement, but I would have to look and see if that property did choose to apply, whether they would qualify under this specific section of the charter. And then, of course, take into account the lease terms as well.
Councillor Lumley?
I think back when the lease was created, it was kind of all taken into consideration, the fact that like the property was given to them, and funds from the Affordable Housing Society was giving to them, and certain other funds were provided so that they could rent out to qualified low-income renters, and which is the essence of affordable housing. I think their revenue model, which obviously the Affordable Housing Society isn't in the business of making money, but to net even, I would imagine. And I think that was just incorporated into the entire financial plan for those people. So, they got free property, and I guess you got to pay tax on it. So, but it all worked out in the end, and they made the financial model work, and the lease was signed. So, I think it's a very fair deal, for sure.
I see no further questions. Can I have a motion to receive the report from the director? Councillor Kroll, Councillor Diandrat, thank you. All in favor of receipt? Thank you very much. And at this time, we have a couple more reports on the agenda, but I'll just have a motion to receive all of the reports on the agenda. Councillor Ladwig, Councillor Lumley, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go on next to 494 South Fletcher funding. And I believe our Director of Infrastructure is with us, who's actually on holidays. So we'll have to give him time to catch up and get back into the process here. So,
yes.
Mr. Newman, welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, no, I'm not back. I'm just briefly here for this meeting, and then I've got the rest of the week off. Yeah. So let's see how much I've retained. So the report that you have in front of you in regards to 494 South Fletcher is largely the same report as was previously provided to you, with some differences. But largely the background does remain the same. So just as a little bit of a chance to kind of go over things again really briefly, we had a 100% funded grant opportunity through COVID resistance infrastructure stream, and council approved the application for the renovation of 494 South Fletcher in the amount of a little bit more than $316,000, and also approved the design to be funded from the COVID-19 Safe Restart grant funds. And that design is now nearing completion, and will serve, the plan is it will serve several functions that lower floor of the building. You've got some photographs on the following pages, and you can see it's in somewhat of a disrepair, shall we say. And so regardless of the grant proposal before the area can be used by anyone, most of the work would have to be completed. However, this grant would provide us an opportunity to complete the work at little or no cost to the Gibsons taxpayers, and we will have a usable asset. So, as I mentioned, several functions that this will service or provide. One is archive storage for the town. Our current archives are scattered throughout various locations in Town Hall, in the Marine Building, and also in a somewhat dilapidated room at the subject property. And none of those have the appropriate level of security or water or fire protection for long-term archive storage. The other function it's going to serve is to provide workstations for staff. And at this point, as you know, we've got some changes in regards to COVID. And staff are currently looking at the logistics of bringing workers back to the town hall. However, we do not have sufficient workstations for all the staff, largely because over the past year and a half, additional staff have come on board. There's been some desk sharing. However, it's fairly limited, and the problem would still exist of not all staff being able to come back if we only have the town hall. And although it may be kind of uncomfortable to acknowledge, this COVID-19 was certainly a challenge for everybody in the community and throughout the world, and it may not be the only time that we face this. And this would also provide resilience for the town in response to a future emergency. And additionally, there is a meeting room that would be part of this renovation that would provide a location for a localized emergency operations center. Grant funding announcements were anticipated to occur in spring of 2021, is what the website says. And that hasn't changed over the past several months. And so we do not know for with any degree of certainty as to when those grant announcements would be made and whether or not we would be successful. Because of the need, staff are recommending that the construction works be tendered regardless in late July with a planned award in late August. This will allow the process of procurement to proceed in a more of an expedited manner while waiting for any grant announcement. And then, as we had discussed at the previous meeting, the possibility for council consideration that should the town be unsuccessful in the grant application, that the project could still proceed using the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant. The other thing that has changed is the budget. It was the grant application went in for $316,000, and staff are recommending that be increased to $450,000, which is largely, I would say, an additional contingency, because if anyone's been doing any building or any purchases of various metal products or well, quite a number of different things have been hit by significant impacts to pricing, significant increases. And plywood, for example, half-inch plywood has tripled in cost. And then what's happening also are that things are increasing in cost, and then something else will start to increase several months after. So not everything has increased at the same time. So we just do not know what will be increasing in the future, and hopefully we wouldn't need that additional contingency, but prudent to have that in there. Under next steps, I've got council approval in theory, and it says July 20th, but I do notice that this item is on tonight's agenda at council, and so that would actually be July 6th for council approval. And however, I don't think that we will be issuing tender documents until it's, earliest is July 21st. So that's about it in summary. The one thing that's not noted in my in staff's recommendations there is that should we be successful with the COVID COVID stream grant, then that grant would only be for $316,000. And if we would need that full $450,000 budget, then the difference would regardless need to be funded from somewhere. So that's not specifically reflected in my recommendations. And perhaps that could be just considered subject to council's discussions.
Thank you, Director. Council, what are your thoughts? Councilor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I realize that, like, for archive storage, it needs to be sort of a bricks and mortar type of construction because of the fire regulations. But with respect to the meeting room, the sort of general workforce area, have modular units been considered that would offer more flexibility as needs change without getting into demolition costs and landfill and tipping costs and things like that?
Yeah, that is a possibility with the design that we've done. However, there are certainly plumbing fixtures that are going in here and there, and so there would be some changes that would be needed for that. I can't say for sure that the modular option would be viable or worthwhile at this point, but it does have the typical drop ceiling that allows all the electrical to be up in the ceiling, and so on, which would help with some of that. And then also there is going to be the fire separation between this area and the adjacent units on the same floor as well as up top.
Councilor Kroll, can I clarify? Were you suggesting a separate modular building?
Well, just sort of past experience, I've been involved in projects where, the cost of the initial build to do modular was marginally more expensive, but then when you got into a situation of having to reconfigure something down the road and demolition costs and, having to repurchase new material to replace what you just tore out, that there was a cost effectiveness there that gave you more flexibility. Some of the systems even provide raceways for, your electric and computer lines and phone lines and things like that. So it was just something that I was curious whether it had been considered. I obviously realized that washrooms and the archive area would need to be, regular, typical construction, but, needs change, and having the ability to have flexibility within the operating system to me would be a huge plus, because usually a lot of the materials can be reconfigured like Lego for adults.
Thank you. Councilor Ledwig?
Can someone remind me what we were planning to do with the COVID restart funds anyways? I know we've spent significant funds on new computers, I think. had we targeted these funds for something else if the grant funds don't come through?
Yeah. I see a couple of hands gone up, so I'll go Councillor Lumley.
I'm going to jump on that. I had a couple problems with this when it was originally put to council. And at the time, it appeared like for me anyway, I don't know, go for anybody else, but it was like, it just kind of, we got these funds and then we're just going, hey, let's spend them. And it was kind of like, okay, well, part of my continuing struggle with this is exactly what Councillor Ladwig said, was that, okay, what's up with these funds? Like, we don't have a plan, or like, it would be nice. And I get it. I kind of get the cart before the horse thing feeling here with like tendering a bid for something and then like spending these funds from the COVID Restart Fund. But then what if council says no to building this thing from the COVID Restart Fund? So you're just throwing this money away, I guess, in a way. I would like to see a plan for the COVID Restart Fund, like not just deciding, hey, let's throw it here, let's throw it there. It just seems very irresponsible, I think, for someone to, you know, to spend or to not have a plan or a financial plan. Like, that's what we do every year. We make a financial plan and we try and stick to it. But it seemed like when we got these COVID Restart Funds, it was a free-for-all, spending free-for-all. So, I mean, I'm really hopeful that the funds can. My hope is that the grant application is successful. My hope is that, you know, there is, you know, different varying opinions, but, you know, building material costs will start coming down a bit after COVID's over and or at the end of COVID, and you know, and then you could revisit it, right? Like, I mean, maybe it's a part of the building. Maybe you just you revisit the design and say, okay, here's what, you know, people are going to be sharing, people are going to be working from home. Like, I don't even know what that looks like. You know, I don't know what the town's plan in the future is for that, you know, but anyway, that was my consideration. I think I'd like to see a plan. Like, I think it'd be best for council if we said, okay, what funds do we have? What are our priorities? Where do they need to be spent? And you know what? Maybe there's $500,000 left over, and you go, hey, no problem, you know. But we just, without knowing that, it's really hard to say yes. That's all. So, yeah.
Councillor Kroll.
I was of, yep. My understanding was that we'd approved the 316, provided the grant came through, and that if it, you know, there was a bit of an overrun on that. I think there was the money for the actual design of the thing that we'd approved. But you know, I sort of agree with, you know, I know that, you know, staff need proper space to work in, and right now, if you walk through the lower level of the town hall, that are, you know, there are people doing, you know, several jobs off various corners of desks, which is, you know, not an ideal situation. And that people are having to share workspaces, even if they are working at home part of the time and coming in. So it's sort of like a revolving door on the lower level of the town hall. So, you know, I appreciate there is the need for this, but I sort of think, you know, if the funding comes through, you know, to the tune of 316,000, and by the time we know that, if material costs are coming down, but, you know, I agree with Councillor Lumley that we sort of need to know of the money we've got, you know, that it's, we're not just writing something carte blanche.
And Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was thinking on the situation, and yeah, and I agree with the plans. I mean, they are useful. We have a facility, and staff needs office place. I think my concern is with the whole, we have a COVID fund to address COVID. I know things look very positive, and we are already celebrating, but we don't know. I mean, we could have another variant or something, and maybe in 3-4 months, we are back to some sort of a crisis again. So I think my concern is perhaps the province is not going to come back next year with another $1 million to address the next crisis, if that's the case. So that's my concern, that it's related to the concern of expenses with this fund. And obviously the increase in material, regardless, even if we approve the Canada if the Canada Infrastructure Program Fund comes forward, then there's still a commitment to approve another $100-something thousand to support the project. So I agree. I mean, I know it is a money well spent, but I mean, we are on the next report, we are talking about saving money for safety issues, which to me is even more important to address because it's a life, right? So we are concerned with spending extra money on Gower Point Road, trying to save some money. But here, I understand that is important for staff. I'm not diminishing the need, but I think I agree. We need a little bit of understanding where we are at. And I would like to, I mean, this COVID fund, is it something that there's a timeline to spend or not? Is it something that the government, like the federal government, if you don't spend, you get it, the federal retract the fund?
I'll refer everybody to page 28, which is a summary right now where we stand with the COVID funds, including this particular project in there, that if it was reduced, that we got the $316,000 grant, we would have approximately approximately $800,000 in a remaining balance to COVID. It can't be used for community infrastructure projects or things of that nature, so it has no relationship to Gower Point Road as a project. It can only be reused for kind of the restart kind of things, such as creating new space for employees to come back to work and things of that nature. So that's the type of thing. That, I don't know if there's a timeline, and I'm going to refer to the Director of Finance on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, I just wanted to also draw council's attention to the grid on page 8 of the report. And so the original funds the purpose of the funds were provided to local governments in order to ensure that local governments could continue to deliver core services during the pandemic and then after, in case we get another one. And so that's the core purpose of the funds. The criteria when council did receive the funds originally, there's 7 listing items of where it qualifies to spend the funds. And being able to, this project here is kind of a classic example of what would be appropriate, because we're enabling us to have more flexibility in terms of being able to operate, to continue core services during a pandemic, which the town did throughout this one, which was wonderful, and this would help us be a lot more resilient in that future. So this project is a core a project that would fit these fundings directly. And you're correct. There's quite a bit of money left in the grant fund, and so to date the plan has been to address operating costs remaining to enable us to remain open, as well as the computer and other electronic technology costs, which has enabled the town to operate virtually and remotely throughout a pandemic. And so that has been the focus so far, because the core purpose of the grant has been, that was the reason why the funds were provided. From a timing point of view, there's no looming, requirement to send the funds back if they are unspent, again, because there's uncertainty in the future as to what type of operating we need to provide. Timing wise, though, the province has indicated that they're looking for the funds to be spent 2022 and at the latest, maybe early 2023 at the latest, because again, it really is for the purpose for municipalities and local governments to rejig their operations in order to be more sustainable in those kind of conditions that we saw and have been seeing so far.
And the resolution the council has already passed, and we have an existing resolution. And right now it is that we would offset through the COVID funds up to an estimated $60,000 to be refunded. So the anticipation still is for the grant. I understand the council's concern. I too would share the idea that it may be more prudent for us to wait for a grant announcement to know then if we have to go to the process of saying, well, we had committed $60,000 to offset additional costs. We hadn't committed the whole amount. And maybe that at that point in time, we have to rethink the project. So I understand council's concern in that regard. So Director of Infrastructure, do we have any indication when these grants are going to be considered or awarded?
No. Bottom line is because they are past due any announcement. I do want to clear up or provide some input to some of the comments that council was making, if with your permission.
Go ahead, please.
So the talking about the COVID and the COVID funds, this office space is set up, or this proposed office space is set up to operate in a COVID situation or that type of situation where you can get your the distancing necessary. It also is able to operate as an EOC, which is something else that we did not have. And one of the other improvements that is going to be made is HVAC, which includes air conditioning, and which, although obviously not COVID related, you know, the recent event in Lytton certainly underlines the fact that, you know, and actually just working in the town of Gibsons during those heat wave, the most recent heat wave, was not possible in some instances. So this would be an air conditioned area where it could meet. The material, I heard waiting for material prices to come down. I'm in the middle of building a suite, and I made that mistake waiting for materials to come down because the price of plywood is still going up. And so over you know, 1 week to the next, it goes up, it goes up, it goes up. And I've heard that, you know, I mean, obviously there's opinions all across the board, but I've heard, yeah, anticipate this to carry on for the next 2 years, is to see these continuing climbs in materials. And I honestly feel like it's going to be anybody's guess as to what the cost will be in 2 years' time and how much longer it will take the prices to actually come down. Will it be just as gradual coming down as going up? I don't know, and I can't tell you that. Staff are currently working at home. I'm rarely in the office, and I have my interactions with staff at Wheatberries, either inside or outside, and masks or no masks, depending on what the situation is. Speaking for myself, that's becoming difficult to run an effective team where we cannot be in the same building. And right now I don't have a desk to move back into. That's being repurposed to another staff member who needs to be on site. I also want to mention that this building, right now it's an asset that is unable to be used. And so even if we were to rent it out, and you know, we found that in a few years we did not need that, we have to spend some money on this building regardless of whether or not it's for staff or not. And lastly, I would just, I can hear your concerns about what if, you know, we have other strains of COVID, et cetera, and that is exactly what this is meant for. This building. I would be curious to know how much we spent responding to COVID this time out of those grant funds, because and I don't know, maybe Director of Finance might have something to say about this, but I believe the main issue that we have left over now is places where staff are able to work and still be appropriately separated in the event of a reoccurrence or resurgence of COVID or some other thing. I don't know, and I can't speak to this, if there are other COVID related infrastructure or improvements that need to be done to the town's operations that have not been done already and that could not be reused. And so I don't know if the Director of Finance could let us know how much, ballpark how much this year and a half of COVID has cost us already. And, if we, and how that looks in comparison to what remains in that fund. And also I suppose the intent of this report, well, for starters, council had requested it based on whether or not we were successful, and of course we don't know that. But the recommendations from here were essentially assuming that we are not getting it, and it would allow us to continue to move forward. And then, should we receive those funds from a grant, so much the better. We have a bonus for ourselves financially.
Yeah, I for one have no problem going through the planning process for it, but I would like, we do get caught in a catch-22 with some of these grants. And if we start the work before the grant is awarded, we may not be eligible for anything that we've paid up until that point in time. Now, that being said, the tender documents, the planning itself, I think has been done. We agreed to that. And I'm concerned we're going too far ahead of the process, knowing that a grant decision has not been made and our application is still out there. And I would be comfortable myself deferring any decision on this until we either receive notice or bring it back at the September meeting, and maybe by that time we will know. And also with this does seem like a logical place for it, but maybe like Councillor Lumley asked, maybe in the meantime, more of a detailed look at other potential uses for the COVID funds could be put together so that we know that we are moving in the right direction. We're not spending them all and finding that we have a shortfall at some point in time that we've lost. So I know that would put this project behind time, but it was all subject to a grant to begin with, and COVID funds, the additional COVID funds of up to $60,000 were expended. And we said, if there was an overage over the 316, we would cover the overage. But right now we're looking at going to tender for potentially up to $450,000, and the only money we have right now is the COVID funds, and with an outstanding application. So I don't know how council feels. Councillor Ladwig first, and Councillor Dindrat.
I was just gonna say, I would second that motion. I just feel like there's a lot of moving parts and different initiatives taking place right now, a number of which are funded by grants, and there's a lot of things happening right now. And I think it would be wise for us to just see what happens with this particular grant first before we move ahead. So I would second that motion to defer.
So the motion would be to defer, and to a specific time. It would be to September 7th, which is when we'll all be back again. Councillor Dindrat?
Yeah, thank you. I think when I look at the budget here, there's a record digitization, which is it could help more people staying home in case of a crisis than even this building. And I'm talking about worst scenario. I mean, my understanding, if the province is saying we can spend this money up to 2023, I'm assuming at this point that we are not anticipating if COVID returns, even if in 6 months, even in a year, I don't think we're going to see any extra money until 2023. It's over. I rather assume that. So perhaps in this budget, it should have also a comparative analysis of, okay, how much is the cost? I know the cost here is saying to be developed, but I think it will be very important to understand how much is the cost, because perhaps an investment in record digitization would help the next crisis. People, I heard from staff that one of the issues of working from home is the lack of records being available online. And I know there are other issues, right, with, personal relationship and things that happen when you are one-on-one, but that could, I think this, I would like to have a recommendation that includes also the costs of, I know the town has planned to do this over time, but if we condense, what will be the cost? Because that could be also a good solution.
I'm gonna have to call the question, because the motion is to defer and it's not a debatable motion. Would like to make a second motion after that, that's fine. But motion to defer to September the 7th on this request. All in favor of that motion? Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's passed. Councilor Diandra, do you want to make a second motion?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I had raised my hand before even the motion, but then there was a motion. I think, there is a request to do a little bit of more planning with the budget, and it's part of the budget. I think it's important to know what's the cost of record digitization, because this could help, more employees even than just a building in the case of emergency for now, right?
So that's your, like staff to investigate the cost of record digitization. Okay, easy for me to say. Second by Councilor Crowell? No, okay. Does anybody second that motion? No. Just to investigate the costs. Okay, I'm not seeing it. Councilor Ludwig, go ahead.
Sorry, I might have been having a blonde moment. Can you reiterate exactly what costs you're looking to have?
The cost to digitize our records in the office, as opposed to hold them all in paper form.
Is that a priority for staff?
It is. Maybe can I speak?
Go ahead, yes.
If you look on page 28 of the report, there's a budget, and one of the lines is record digitization, but it's to be developed. And I heard over and over during the crisis that because working from home can work really well if you have all the digits, that because you do that. But if you don't have the records digitized, could be an impediment. So the town has planned to do this over the years. And there's a budget to be developed here, but I thought it would be important to estimate, because this is a plan B as well. We don't know if you're going to have another crisis in the next 6 months.
Okay, I would second that. Okay, to develop the cost of digitizing.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Crowell?
I would just like to, I sort of assumed that the record digitization to be determined was based on the fact that ultimately they would have a space to be able to do it in. Being able to consolidate records and digitize them, where are you going to do it right now? There's no space to do it. People are working on the corners of their desk and all sorts of stuff. So, I think it's a bit of a cart and horse thing again is, I don't think anyone disagrees with the fact that the staff are rammed into the town hall like sardines in a can. And with COVID, people had to work outside of the office. So, I sort of assumed that part of this expansion to have better workspace would enable the digitization to take place in a logical manner rather than, people can't take boxes of town documents home and scan them.
And at this point in time, we're just looking for that cost. Councillor Ludwig?
Just to Councillor Crowell's comment, a project like that, I assume, would be too big that you would never ask staff to do it anyways. Like normally you would contract that out. And so literally somebody comes, takes all their boxes away, they scan it in somewhere else. And yeah, it's a big bill. It's too much work to ask staff to do that when they're trying to juggle their workload already. So I think Councillor DeAndretti's got a good point. That would be a good use of the funds at this stage to have all those historic records digitized so that when somebody comes with a new variance request or development application, you can see what's happening in the history of that lot.
Okay, did we call the question on that already? I don't think so. So all in favor of that resolution? Thank you. Okay, thank you. So that's passed as well. So thank you. And staff, we're going into the summer vacation. At this point in time, we won't be all jumping in together. We will be looking back to coming to work in the fall. If a project like this goes forward, hopefully we'll have the funding. And if the funding comes in sometime, there will be 2 more meetings this month. And we have the ability to call a special meeting even in August, because I don't think many of us are going to be too far away from our homes. So we can move forward if the funding comes in before September the 7th. So right now we deferred it, but if it comes and we have to move it sooner as a result of the funding announcement, we'll be happy to do that. Okay. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the Gower Point Road traffic calming. And this has been received, and go back then to the Director of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. And just a note on the previous report and this one, I'm not sure if you need a motion to have them both go straight to council tonight, but as I say, I did see them both on the agenda and possibly even one of the planning ones, I'm not sure. So as I say, not sure for if you need a resolution to that effect or not.
I'll leave that. Yeah, corporate officer before we close the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so staff have already reported to council or committee on this item, and this is dealing with traffic calming elements of Gower Point Road, roughly between Franklin Road and the town boundary towards Secret Beach. And at that time, we gave you staff gave you an overview of the various elements of the traffic calming. And since that time, we went out to and had a public meeting, and which again was very well attended, I felt, and I found it again the Zoom option for public meetings as being an excellent option for us moving forward. I'm just going to go through the summary table to start with, and then I'll go into perhaps some more of the details. So there were a number of elements that were recommended, and staff brought them forward to you. Subsequently, there was also some other ideas that were brought forward. Actually, some of them were brought forward prior to staff report. They came from TRAC, and then we had some comments as well subsequent to the meeting from TRAC again on the specific traffic calming elements. So for starters, staff are supporting the reduction in posted speed limit, and banning trucks or no truck signage, the center line rumble or mumble strips, the single lane segment, the textured road surface segment, which is where visually the road narrows. However, it doesn't really. What happens is the asphalt narrows from 6 meters wide to 4 meters wide, and the additional meter or the meter 2 meter narrowing is made up of a band of concrete on both sides, which vehicles can drive on. And so it's not an actual physical reduction in that in the actual driving lane width. Although it's not a traffic calming element, it is a safety issue or a safety improvement, and that is to provide bike refuges wherever possible. And that will be determined during the detailed design. A couple things that are left to be determined. One is the safety fence that is similar to design as the one that you likely have seen coming off Lionsgate Bridge and going through Stanley Park, and also a curb on the landward side of Gower Point Road as opposed to the water side, or sorry, in addition to the water side. So those ones are to be determined during discussions with the civil engineering firm and the detailed design to determine what can and can't be done. What is not being supported by staff are changing it to one way or alternating to one way, and we'll go into those in a little bit more detail. Also not supporting the cycle activated signal, or increasing the boardwalk width. And largely those, well, not all of them, but finance is one of the considerations for those, as well as requiring more money and study to determine some of those improvements or changes. There was a suggestion to widen the road to create a cycle lane, and that would be impacting the environmentally sensitive dryland forest, as well as creating a bit of a scar of freshly blasted rock on the side of the of Gower Point Road. We can't reduce the lane widths to make space for cyclists, nor is there enough room for a center median. And speed bumps are not supported due to delaying response times for emergency vehicles. If no one's had the pleasure of driving in one of our fire trucks, I would recommend it if you have the option or the opportunity, because their suspension is very, very stiff. And so they can't drive over speed bumps at any sort of speed. It's quite evident if you do take a ride in some of their equipment, that becomes very quickly evident. If they go over a pothole, you really feel it. So all of the proposed work is to be done by the developer according to the terms in the development agreement. The traffic calming elements to reduce vehicle speed to 30 kilometers an hour was not intended specifically to make it safer for cyclists. It was generally to improve safety in general and to recognize that we're going to get additional pedestrian and cycle activity in that area due to the improvements on the boardwalk, etc. So it wasn't specifically for cyclists. There was the multi-use path that was a little bit more focused on the cycling and was kind of a little bit more of a, in a way, a plan B if the traffic calming was not able to achieve what we were trying to achieve. So I'm happy to take any questions in regards to the proposed or the supported traffic calming elements, and I won't go through those in detail. However, I do want to comment on some of the other items. The staff have always kind of had a vision or envisioned this as being an entranceway to a unique part of town and an area that is well known in the town and well used. And so what we are also looking at, in addition to these improvements, is there a way that we can accent at the two ends of this stretch of road that you're entering into a unique area, and to slow down and enjoy the scenery in a way. The track and some other people have made suggestions, and one of them was converting the road to one way, and there was no particular, or at least to my knowledge, there was no particular direction that was favored. However, if we went one way from to Elphinstone from Gibsons, Lower Gibsons, as well as the section of Garrow Point Road in question, would still receive the full impact from discharging ferry traffic, because of course they're going to be discharging the same amount, same number of vehicles, and would continue to travel to Elphinstone. And traffic counts certainly show a surge in traffic after ferry discharges. If we go one way from Gibsons to Gibsons from Elphinstone, a connection point to the bay and bluff areas will be eliminated. That's a concern from my point of view, because you're eliminating an exit from an area of town, and I'm thinking largely emergency, but also the daily traffic heading out of these neighborhoods that might typically use Garrow Point connection. For instance, any traffic traveling to Seychelles, perhaps for work or what have you, they would now funnel through Five Corners. So those are the reasons for not supporting that. Alternating one way, controlled by traffic lights, that would also have some of the similar concerns that we would have that I just talked about. But also, this is beyond the terms of the development agreement, and the installation of traffic lights can range anywhere from $150,000 to $500,000, and the annual cost for operations and maintenance and funding for replacement would range from $15,000 to $30,000 a year, adding that to our operations budget. And so, looking at just for the operations and maintenance, roughly a 1% or up to a 1% tax increase. Cyclist activated signal. My basic concerns are that we would have to fund, again, it's beyond the development agreement. We would have to fund the installation of the lights, which would be anticipated to be in excess of $100,000. And the annual cost for operations, maintenance, and funding for replacement would likely exceed $10,000. I'm also seeing other challenges with that, just on logistics and how fast cyclists get through and so on and so forth. Another one was signing the boardwalk directing cyclists to dismount anyone heading in the wrong direction, or in both directions. And that could be done independently, regardless of the traffic calming. There was a suggestion to increase the width of the boardwalk to accommodate two-way bike traffic as well as pedestrian traffic. Again, this is beyond the scope of the development agreement. The development agreement gives a specific width of that boardwalk. And so any cost for increasing the width of the boardwalk, as well as in some locations having to build a boardwalk where otherwise the shoulder is being planned on being used in certain areas, that would need to be borne by the town. And the cost would be significant, and I'm thinking well into six figures. So that's a big financial commitment that the town would have to make in order to do that. I also mentioned the blasting in order to widen the road, and that also is not supported because of the dryland forest and the visual scar. Reducing lane widths and center median, again, insufficient width. And then we talked about the vertical concerns with vertical traffic calming. which are something like a speed bump. So as far as communication, as I say, we've had a couple meetings with TRAC, and then we had the public meeting on the 21st. And based on the comments that we received, which was about 37 comments, well, I'm not saying about, 37 comments, there was specifically 7 people who stated that they are for the design as is, and then 12% who would support the design with changes. And those changes I've summarized there as well. There was a single concern about the proposed visual narrowing, and recall that's the visual narrowing of the concrete bands as you approach the crosswalks. There were 6 people against the single lane segment. There were comments that they wanted to maximize cycle refuges, which would be done. There was comments of support for the bike traffic signal and also for installation of street lights, not traffic lights, but street lights for illumination. A number of people spoke out in favor of the banning of trucks, and also about improving the area between the town boundary and the SCRD, or within the SCRD there towards Secret Beach. And we are actually having a meeting with various representatives that would be helpful in that regard. And there was comments about the separate westbound bike lane, the multi-use trail, and the general opposition to rumble strips. I think there was 2 or 3 people that weren't in favor of that. So there was also a number of people asking for additional things outside of this report, and the majority of these questions regardless have been addressed. Sorry, that last part wasn't very clear. So a number of responses asking for additional information, and this report provides that. And I think that is all that I want to specifically bring to your attention. And then as I say, the next step would be to notify the developer to proceed with the final detailed design, and staff will be working with them in order to, as I say, maximize the refuges, etc. So I think probably now is a good time to hand the floor over to you folks, and for any questions that I might be able to answer for you.
Thank you, Director. One thing, we did receive an additional input from TRAC. Have you had a chance to read that letter we received from them?
Yes, I did. And actually, if you wouldn't mind just taking another question, and I will dig that up, okay, because I can speak to each of those points.
Okay, and the other question I had was whether or not the traffic calming strip of the single line segment, as opposed to implementing that on a permanent basis to start with, could we try that as a temporary basis and see how it works? I'd be interested, rather than trying to put anything permanently in place, could we try something temporarily and see how that works for the traveling public?
Couple, in theory, yes, or in principle. For starters, there would be costs associated with that, signage, etc., that we may or may not be able to ask the developer to pay for that as part of the design. And I agree. I think that that is often worth doing to find out what the specific issues might be with a measure like that. It would also need to be in place for, I would suggest, a minimum of a year, because you can guarantee that if you put it up for example, 3 weeks, everyone is going to hate it. and that usually lasts for at least 6 months before people start getting used to it. I say everybody, I'm exaggerating there, but it does take time for people to change and to understand the mechanism of it. It would also be interesting to, if we were contemplating that, is to do some formal or informal traffic counts. The one concern that I have, though, with that is that the developer needs to proceed to final design, and that needs to happen. Well, I'll be letting them know during July in regards to that. And I would be a little bit more inclined to leave that one section, to build everything else as designed, design the single lane section. However, before putting in the actual physical permanent narrowing, is that we do that as part of the overall construction, and that is just something that is done prior to putting in the permanent measures. Going back to your first question, Mayor Beamish, so for starters, TRAC expressed an interest in the transition to SCRD boundary to coordinate. And yes, we are having conversations with Area E about that, and not just about this one, but also Reed Road, because that one is a border that actually goes down the center of the road as opposed to beginning and an end. So yes, that's going to be happening. However, we do not have the luxury of waiting on these elements until the ministry makes some sort of commitment. We would have to be doing it regardless, and the transitions would have to be done, I suppose, assuming the worst, or assuming that they are not done in the short term, but also that they could be easily modified to work with facilities that are between Secret Beach and this length. There was a question about lengthening the bike lane for southbound cyclists, and the key part with that is that well, one thing in the narrowed section that will actually make room for cyclists to be able to ride on the road. They would be kind of behind a barrier or what have you, but because of the reduced width for vehicles. However, that needs to be, you need to have a sight distance. You need to be able to see the other vehicle. Otherwise, you need to get into signals again. And that's, as I say, just a very large cost, and one that the town would have to bear. So certainly we can make it as long as recommended by the traffic consultant, but certainly it could not be any longer to be around the corner or to the degree that TRAC was requesting in their memo. Their memo also indicated that they felt that it was confusing going through 4 different sections of traffic calming, with rumble strips, without rumble strips, with narrowing, without narrowing, or visual narrowing, and the 1 lane section. And the rumble strips are just intended to alert a driver that they are crossing the center line. It's not meant as a I mean, I suppose in a way it is a traffic calming, that it alerts drivers and they're aware that they are crossing the center line at these blind corners. But it's visually, it's no different from the rest of the section of the road, apart from a slight texture difference. And the intent also would be along here is to get appropriate signage that that vehicles are not to pass cyclists unless they are in a refuge. So the intent is to keep riders in with traffic, and they're not encouraged to pass them. They mentioned fiberglass bollards or markers. That's something that would be looked at during detailed design and to determine whether there's adequate width there. But say that's a little bit more of a detailed design. The same thing with the fence is we've had discussions about that with the developer and the engineer. And again, I see that as a more of a detailed design item. The number 6 was distinguishing between cycling and walking areas. And yes, I completely agree with that. However, we haven't even got to the stage of the design where we've discussed, although we've called it a boardwalk, it's not necessarily going to be wood. And so that's a sort of detail we would include in the detailed design. Crosswalks, there's some concerns about crosswalk marking. Again, that will be done appropriately as according to the traffic engineer's recommendations. And track also had a concern about the no trucks, and I've got no problem with that, as you know, and I think council may have mentioned support of that. I can't recall. So those are my responses to the memo from track.
Okay, I'm going to go to council first now, and I think everybody's had their hand up. So I'm going to start with Councillor Lumley, and I'm going to rotate the way through. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. It's quite a project. The trucks, that's like a certain size of truck, I can imagine, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to specify what size truck you're restricting, and it can range.
Yeah, okay. And then, you know what? Honestly, I think the town should invest in the lights. I think like public safety, and if you want to reduce the traffic through there, people know there's lights there. They're not going to go there. I think the best option is for the lights, and as a councillor, I would be more than happy to vote to pay for those lights and upgrade whatever the developer's costs are. Do a lights upgrade. I think that's the best option. It's kind of like this detailed, unique project. And personally, for me, I'd say do it right the first time. Like just nail it, and then it'll be there forever, and it'll work great forever. And so I just think the lights is the best option. That's just me. Thanks for the report, eh? Thanks for all the work.
Mayor Beamish, do you want me to respond as the questions come up, or just make note of them?
Well, I'm going to just have a follow-up question there too at the same time, and then you can respond. Where would you see the lights being located that it did not block access to the driveways for the residents along that section of Garpoy? So it'd be beyond there. You had a backup, because there are several houses along that section.
I can't comment on that because the design and feasibility of traffic lights, I can't say that is a superior idea, because we do not know what the impacts will be of doing that. It's not just a matter of coming up with the costs, it's a matter of doing a whole study on installation of traffic lights. This is I wouldn't say it's unheard of, because it's not, but it's a different use of traffic lights than most people are used to, is that you are stopping and it's not in an intersection. It doesn't matter, but it's, as I say, it's a little bit different. So you definitely need to have a traffic engineer, or for council to fund a traffic engineer to be looking at that. And you'd have to come up with some money to do that now. And as I say, I cannot tell you that will be a better idea. Personally, I feel that this is actually the best idea. But regardless, I couldn't, that's beyond the scope of the developer, and council would have to come up with some money pretty fast because we can't be holding up the developer at this point. That's not an option. I don't know if council wants to do that kind of independently of the design, have the design, or staff would provide approval for the current design, and if council wants to change that in future before it's built, then, as I say, the costs would have to be incurred by the town. And that would also be coming up with an accurate cost estimate. I'm just looking at costs on various other installations. This one's definitely different, and I may be completely out, up or down, on my cost estimates on that. But we would need to determine whether or not there is a.
Let's put that
funding.
on for now and go to Councilor Ladwick.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. Thank you, Mr. Newman. So just, well, first off, thank you for the report. There was a number of attachments that were supposed to be in the report that weren't. In the future, if we could receive those, I'd really appreciate it, because I actually did want to see the Bunt draft traffic calming reports and to evaluate, to see whether or not different options were evaluated. So that would really help me if I could see that. I think it'd also be good for the public to see the letter from TRAC. I think that would be a worthwhile thing to be recorded in this agenda. My primary issue with this right now is about process more than anything. I'm not saying that the current plan is not adequate. I don't really know. I'm not a traffic expert by any means. I'm with Councillor Lumley. I feel that just from sitting here right now, the light option appeals far more to me than what's currently presented. But my issue is with process. My understanding of the process that we have at hand right now is the development agreement gets developed between the developer and staff. Then staff goes away and hires a consultant to do a report that then comes up with some kind of a draft schematic that then comes to council and key stakeholders for input on, rather than coming to key stakeholders like the SCRD, like TRAC, not even us necessarily, but coming to some of these key stakeholders first and saying, here's a condition in this development agreement that we need to address. What options would you like to see us evaluate with the consultant, so that we can come back to you with a well-reviewed set of objective evaluation on 2 or 3 different options for council to vote on. Right now, I feel like the only input I have as a councillor is either accept or reject. And that is not adequate. I don't feel like that's an adequate form of for me to provide input to. If I reject this, it's not helping from a traffic calming perspective, and it's certainly not, I mean, it's better than nothing, so to speak. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best option that I'm aware. There hasn't been a full evaluation of different options that the community would like to see, and that's what I'm looking for. So it's almost just like a bit of a reverse in process. If we could have had, like, why we're getting letters from TRAC now after the consultant report is what needs to flip. We need to be getting input from TRAC before the consultant report, and then hire the consultant to go away and evaluate the options that TRAC and the SCRD perhaps have provided input into. Sorry, I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Respond?
Yeah, I just realized from your comment about where the lights would go, I have no idea. Again, that's something that a traffic consultant would have to, traffic engineer would have to come up with. The attachments are now attached. I understand that there was an issue, and I don't know what it was, being away on vacation. So the current version does have the 4 attachments. You asked about process. The process was already done at the rezoning. And so what happened was council drafted and negotiated an agreement with the developer, and there was a public hearing on that, and that was the opportunity for public to provide input on this development. And that included traffic calming, it included the cyclists or the accommodation for cyclists, included the boardwalk. So all of that was done years ago. And within that development agreement, you mentioned the council can just accept or reject. And this is a little bit awkward, but not quite, because this is an FYI to council, because council has authorized staff to approve this. And I recognize that that gives me, as the identified staff member, a lot of responsibility. And so I wouldn't be looking at doing a one-way section and all of this sort of stuff without letting council know that this is what's going to happen. So if council said, staff, nope, we're just completely opposed to this, you cannot do that, you would have to go to largely you'd have to go to the developer and say, hey, we want to change the term of the agreement to say that council is going to be responsible for accepting or rejecting this. Because if there is a holdup in their design, which right now they are waiting for staff's feedback, if there is a holdup in their process that was going to either cost some money or what have you, the terms of the development agreement already say that council is not the party that approves this. So as I say, it's a little bit of an awkward position for staff to be in. And as I say, that's why I'm bringing it to you for information, as well as something like this is to have the traffic engineer, the developer's traffic engineer, provide the options and alternatives, and then go to the public and go, okay, give us this is the outline, this is, the concept, what are your concerns? And staff may be able to work out those design considerations with the design consultant. And so we still hear what council's concerns are, we still hear what the public's concerns are, and we just use those to refine. But as I say, the time for the time for public and council input was years ago in the development agreement, because that is what says what the developer is to do and not to do. And I mentioned in regards to TRAC is that, traffic is TRAC is a special interest group that I value their input. However, they are not engineers. And so they can put forward their comments and their wish lists and their suggestions. And some of those we're able to use, some of them we can't. And so I see them as kind of like part of the just the group that I want to hear from, so that if we are able to tweak certain things or make adjustments without any huge impact, then I'm certainly happy to hear from them.
Follow up, Councilor Ludwig.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. I promise this will be my last comment. I'll let others speak. Just in follow up to Mr. Newman's comments. So just to be clear, I'm not looking, I by no means want to change the terms of the agreement. I recognize that was done years ago, but I'm sure you've heard the expression that it takes, you need to inform people about something 3 times before it actually resonates. For something to have been consulted on years ago, yes, we can just say that's it, check, that box was checked. But we're eventually going to hear from the community one way or another. And what I'm looking for is a refinement in how we engage the public. And if we had gone to TRAC, if we'd gone to the SCRD, if we'd gone to maybe it's emergency services, I'm not sure, but some of our key stakeholders before we went to the consultant and said, this is what they're wanting to see. Can you give us a couple of options that incorporates those considerations in your design plan, so that then when we come back with the design plan, we're more likely to get a receptive response. So I'll
Yeah.
just leave it at that and I'll move on.
No, and that's fine. I sorry, I get where you're coming from now. And we actually met with Track, ooh, man, about a year ago, to get their input. They provided a memo to council on all the different things that they would like to see or were suggesting or what have you. And we did provide that information to the consultant. And so the consultant had looked at all of their suggestions, including a traffic signal, because that was mentioned, as I say, roughly a year ago. I couldn't tell you the exact date, but I think that may be one of the attachments. And so we did go to the special interest group about that, and get their input, and that was provided to the traffic consultant. I said, here you go, here's what we're hearing. And as I say, unfortunately, most of them were either beyond the scope of the developer, for instance, the assessment of whether a traffic light would work, or what the impacts would be, or were just not viable. And so that was done. And then we went to the public and said, hey, this is, what else do you think on this? And the public again provided thoughts and comments about it. And I'm going to be taking those and also providing those to the consultant, because you'll note on the consultant's report, the Bunt report, it says draft. They're waiting for my feedback on that.
Point out to council as well, in the track letter we recently just received, copy of their November 2020 input was attached. So that and that's very similar. There's not a lot of difference between the two. And also point out to council, the council has already taken one of the options off the table, and that was the parallel, the road, the trail that was also included in the plan. Council resolved to have that removed as an option. So that trail was taken out last year by council. So that as an option. So go to Councilor Diandrat.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dave, for the report. I think I have a big concern because right now Gower Point is a danger road, right? No one would go biking there for leisure, right? Unless they feel confident. But the moment we promote as an active transportation corridor, and that will be used, families will be attracted to that. And then we have tourism that we are highly promoting. On our regular meeting, we are having sustainable tourism, and sustainable tourism is usually, they're talking about green tourism. Green tourism is also attached to ecotourism, like outdoors activities. So, and we know also the population is growing, more traffic. With COVID, there's a second way of discovery of the Sunshine Coast. Many people might choose not to travel because of issues. And so we will receive more tourists. So the problem I have is we are bringing these people now and say, come here. But I don't feel we are offering the level of safety. And that's my concern. And track, yeah, they are interest groups, but they are users. And bikers suffer. Stanley Park had a death of a cyclist because of the lack of barrier. And in 2016, they have a death because a woman was biking and fell from the sidewalk because it was not protection. So, and she was killed. So we are talking about this level of safety. And that's my biggest concern. Right now, we are not calling people to come. And I think there are options that I would particularly like to see, and I agree with Councillor Lumley, if we need to spend more money, I mean, we're talking about safety. There's a option of widening the boardwalk, increase the width. I mean, why? And I understand, yeah, it has to be expensive, right? At certain areas in Gospel Rock, but at the same time, we need to do it right. I don't want to contemplate the idea that in some years we're going to have a casualty there. And it was this, well, perhaps was the council, but council is council that we participated in this. So I was contemplated, for example, you get a family that or let's see, there's Elphinstone with some kids, and they go, okay, let's go on the boardwalk. On the way back, they have to take the road. Well, if they have kids, they're not going to take the road. So now we will have 100% traffic both ways on the boardwalk. And I mean, and we will cause problems. And actually, we could have casualties as well, or some accidents between pedestrians and cyclists. So I think this is a serious issue. We write down here, traffic calming, strategic implications. Traffic calming measures will be designed and constructed with a focus on managing our assets. So I thought about it. Are people assets? And when people are in our jurisdictions, are they assets as well? They are for the Squamish Nation, because they said that when people come to their territory, they are responsible for. So I feel the same in this regard. We're gonna be attracting people, telling them, come and visit this beautiful area. But I don't feel we are getting the level of security. And so obviously there's no room here to criticize. I'm really glad that Councillor Ludwig talked about process, because I felt awkward as well. I understand. I just want to move forward. How can we explore the level? I mean, this option, we don't know how much it costs. Yeah, 6 figures, but we don't really know. I would like to see the possibilities, because I don't really feel that what we are offering has the safety of level that we are attracting people for. We are giving them come, but we are not offering the same. And I feel that there will be risk. I really feel.
Director of Infrastructure, respond.
Yes, so promoting it as a cycle route, I think one of the considerations that we would want in that is what's offered beyond the town boundary, because it's most definitely at this point a dead end as far as safer accommodation for cyclists. Number two is that engineers are designing this, so they are the ones that are responsible for safety, and they are the ones that would look at, are traffic signals actually the safer option? Although it may sound safer, we can't tell you that. Staff can't tell you that. That's going to be a traffic engineer that would say that, because what's going to happen is it's not just going to affect that place. It is going to cascade throughout the town as to what that does to other traffic. There's also signage that can be put up to let cyclists dismount, or for anyone who is not comfortable with riding on the road, that they can dismount and walk on the boardwalk. The other thing to consider is look at how wide the boardwalk presently is, or presently designed, just as a mental thing. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's 3 meters wide, so that's the width of one painted lane width up on the highway. And making it wider still, it's going to make that much more of an impact on the dryland forest on the water side, for example. And so where you asked where we're at with this is that I think council needs to, or council's in the position where they have to make some difficult decisions. Is it going to, are we going to spend all of our capital money 1 year on this one area? Are you going to do some blasting on the one side of the road and balance the safety of cyclists versus the environmental and the visual impact of that? Do you construct the multi-use path so that you provide a safe corridor? Those are all decisions that council needs to talk about. From here, my place would be to have is that I would be talking to the developer, saying, go ahead with this design. We're not at construction stage, and we won't be for another couple of years. go ahead with this design so that you're not held up and that we can approve it. Because what needs to happen is that we need to take bonding for that. And in order to take bonding for the work, in order for them to get a servicing agreement and carry on with construction, we need to know what the value is. And so I would suggest that we carry on with that, and then council have some discussions in September as to, and staff can provide some details on costs for the initial study. How much is it going to cost for a study to determine whether traffic lights, for example, are a good idea, or what the impacts are going to be? We can get a cost estimate together, or council can discuss getting a cost estimate together for widening the boardwalk, or blasting, or whatever it is that you want to do, and then determine where that money comes from. And we can then do that in parallel with this. But at this point, we're not in a position to halt everything until council looks at other alternatives. However, council does have the time to look at these other options before it is constructed. But we have to, staff have to provide the go-ahead on the design of this, and council just needs to recognize that there's going to be funding needed to change those engineered plans in future, if that's what council decides to do.
Councillor Crowell?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish, and thank you, Director Newman. It's a bit of a can of worms. My concern is, and I appreciate what Councillor Lumley is saying, and Councillor Ladwig, and lights, no lights, and the implications of those. My big concern is what we're doing is, and you referenced it yourself earlier, we're creating a highway to a dead end, because we're creating this facility through this sensitive area, and all of a sudden it halts at the town line. My concern is what happens, if the ministry says, "Oh, look what the town of Gibsons has done. This is impossible. We're going to make Gower Point Road from Pratt Road to this obstacle course the town's created one way." So where I have a bit of concern is I don't have a great sense that Modi has been, and the regional district have sort of had their 2 cents in this. As you said, the project has been this road improvement is part of the development, but the dialogue with the ministry, I'm a little concerned about. And to that same extent, Area E, obviously they're stuck with having to deal with the ministry and the regional district, but I haven't seen a lot of feedback from either of those entities with respect to this project. And, yes, it'd be lovely to have this wonderful, safe facility, but as you said yourself, once we hit the town line, it ends. So encouraging families to cycle on this lovely boardwalk that suddenly comes to a screaming halt, and now you have, all sorts of bicycle and pedestrian traffic on Gower Point Road. That's what really concerns me. What we do within the town, we have some say about, but what we're doing to people once they get to the end of this, that's my concern.
One option, of course, is do nothing and return it, keep it the way it is. And we have a road that's existed for umpteen years and has always existed. And that's certainly a viable option. And I'm sure the developer would be happy with that. And that we don't attract people to the area as much as people will come. But one option is the town asks the developer to have no impact on Gower Point Road in their development process, which is something to think about. Councillor Ladwig.
Sorry, I know I keep saying this is my last comment. So I also wanted to say earlier that I also respect and appreciate that we can't hold up the developer because we want more time to think through this pretty significant project. And so again, with regard to process, I struggle with understanding why a development agreement Like, why can't we just put a clause, like, why can't we just put a clause at the end of whatever kind of draft plan we come up with and say, or the equivalent value of? Like, why does it have to be ironed out to the point where we're pigeonholed into this one design right now? And that's putting all this pressure on us to have a design figured out whether we're comfortable with it or not, rather than just say to him, in concept, you know, here's a concept, here's the value of it. We expect this contribution from you. We're going to continue to fine tune what we're working on here, and this will be your contribution. I struggle to understand that.
And that's a planning question, and obviously something that we can't do about this development agreement. But I would suggest that you perhaps have that conversation with the planner to discuss that for next servicing agreement or next development agreement that comes across your desk. Because I'm out of my realm on providing comments on that. But bottom line is the council at the time, or council, wanted to see traffic calming, and they wanted to see a boardwalk. Those are, and a bunch of other stuff as well. And then the engineering has to go into that, and there's parameters. There's the width of the road. There is the vertical and horizontal alignment of the road, and they're competing priorities. And traffic calming, to slow traffic calming, or to slow traffic down to 30 kilometers an hour, it is going to impact people. End of story. And so, regardless of whether people like the solutions chosen, as you can see from the Bunt report, there are certain measures that just cannot be done there because of the constraints, and they've recommended what will have an effect and what will have very little effect. So yeah, as I say, changing the processes in regards to the development agreements, better check with the director of planning on that one.
Yeah, and Area E is certainly, this is not new. This process has been going on for several years, and TRAC has been involved for several years. So this is not new. It's just suddenly when somebody says we have to make a decision, and somebody says, "Oh, wait a minute, we haven't thought about it yet," and we've got to be careful of that process too, because we'll always run into that. We'll always run into the guy who moved into the house next door to the development a month ago and says, "Wait a minute, nobody asked me." And wants to change everything. So Area E has known about this project for an awful long time, and so and so is the SCRD, and we've heard about it from them. So so it's one thing to say you didn't ask us, but it's one other thing to say, but you were aware and you knew about it. So that it needs to be looked at in full context. Councillor Dindrat.
Thank you, Mayor. I think, the way I'm thinking is we need to move forward. And to me, I mean, when I'm dealing with something, and I think it's anyone, there's the non-negotiable. To me, a life is not negotiable. And when it comes to safety, this is not negotiable. So my concern with the current proposal and the incentivizing of active transportation and so on, it's that we are attracting people that there is a bigger likelihood of an accident. And I know, Mayor, that you also, okay, one solution, we do nothing. Yes, that could be a solution. But again, I would like to explore the options. So I prefer your first suggestion, or perhaps was a suggestion of the Director of Infrastructure, that in September, we look at that, we budget, and if there is a way of still getting the benefits of some improvement anyways, because obviously there is big improvement in slowing down. This is a dangerous road regardless. But we know, I think we know things people don't respect, so we can expect 50K in certain occasions. We know that people will try to pass, and we know that there will be issues with cyclists. So can we find a common ground that we explore the solutions and we find a solution that would benefit this, because to me, it's not a voting thing. Oh, more people like this and less people. No, we are dealing with some safety. I don't think we want this karma for our town, right? That people had accident, that someone was killed because, you know, they are on an active transportation route, but there's all this potential things to happen. So I want to move forward in the direction that it brings all these possibilities, because we have, I think there are very good steps on the drawings, right? It's not that it's out of question. No, there's many progress that has been made, but can we make a little, raise the bar and do it right, as Councillor Lumley says? So how can we move forward, Mayor?
Yeah, I think that we need to, as I say, I'm almost thinking we need to rethink. I mean, one option would be simply to cost out the project with the developer and ask the developer to contribute that money to a fund that the town would then take care of the project themselves. But, you know, I'm told that the Area E has a lot of gas tax money that they could quite easily fix up their section of the road that they haven't spent. So there's a number of options. It's always been a problem, that section of Gower Point Road. This was an opportunity, I think, that the previous council saw to improve it and fix it. And that's what you do with developers. They are responsible for improving the roads. If council wants to look at the value of that works, someday, sometime in the future, council may spend the money to do it, but you at least have a reserve to look at that. And maybe that's something we have to talk to the planner about, as to how can we pull that back and do nothing, but do it ourselves when the time is right. I don't know. We are acquiring a park there. It will be a park, and there will be the conservation area or the no build area on either side of it, so that it is an area that attract people too. It's difficult on a developer though, because it's not the developer's fault that we can't make up our minds. So that we have to recognize that. So, Councillor Lumley.
I think we can make up our minds, because we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about, he's agreed to construct a calming area, and the director of infrastructure in his report says, well, council's given him the authority to agree on it. But I think what council is saying is that this might be such a big thing that, you know, and I know, Larry, it's public input and all this stuff, like, although it might not be necessary, it's probably the best thing. And I know we've done that and everything, and I did just think, yeah, at the time of you're going to write up these agreements, but even if, like the mayor, you say do nothing, well, you're still going to have to change the development agreement because it's already in the development agreement. So, I mean, I think the greatest thing would be just, I don't know how hard it is, but, you know, I don't know, just have to revisit it. Just say, hey, listen, so far so good. This is like a mock-up. This is not a final project. It hasn't been approved, but it has been approved for you to go ahead with your servicing agreements. This will get revisited. I mean, I don't know how hard that would be, but I think that's the way it should be.
I hear that's what the director of infrastructure is saying.
Yeah.
You have to give an approval to go ahead with something.
Yeah. And then we should put, you know, somebody should make a motion immediately after this saying that we have to get to this like right away, like September. We should be committing the funds to, if nothing's going to happen for 2 years, at least we get to like split the funds up over 2 years, no matter how expensive it might be. But we should, as a council, commit to like first thing in September saying, okay, we're going to commit to hiring a design engineer for the lights and everything else, and let's just do it. So anyway, that would be my 2 cents. Director of Infrastructure, does that work for you?
Yeah, sorry, Mayor, I'm late for a meeting, so I have to duck out. I'm hoping that you're very close to a resolution. So just to recap, I'm giving the go-ahead to the developer. And as far as I'm concerned, at that point, we are meeting the terms of the development agreement. If council in September wants to, like, staff can prepare a report for options for council, starting with an assessment of what traffic lights, for example, would be, and where that money could possibly come from. And council can then have that discussion at that time. And as I say, staff would provide various options for council's consideration at that point. But right now, the developer would be free to carry on as planned.
Yeah, and proceed with a plan that we would be able to look at it sometime in the future. And so
sorry, I do have to duck out. I obviously didn't allow enough time between meetings here, but I've got somebody at my door.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And you're on holidays. We respect that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councilor Diandrat?
Mayor Bibish, I think there are other options, and it's not, I mean, there's the cyclic activated signal, which is still a signal, but it will be activated. Again, it's not up to me to judge, but perhaps if we evaluate all I mean, I'm not sure, perhaps increasing the boardwalk, we won't need certain things. So I would like just to have, at least, for me, at least these three options evaluated.
I think that's the recommendation from Councilor Lumley, is that the developer has the authority to go ahead with a design. We will look at that, but we'll also look at other options at our cost. And that's and so that Councilor Lumley, is that your resolution?
Yes. Yeah, that's my resolution.
Okay, and we'll ask staff to bring back a costing for other options in September.
The safest option.
And we'll have that discussion then.
Safety's number one. And you'll see in the development agreement, especially the paragraphs in Dave's report, not one of those paragraphs mentions safety. So that's the way.
I think it's a given when you build a road. Frankly,
I don't know, traffic lights or no traffic lights.
I think that the insurance companies will want that. Yeah. Okay. Someone want to move Councilor Lumley's, Councilor Ladridge, further discussion? Councilor Kroll, do you have anything else to add?
I just wanted some clarification on where the traffic lights are what you're saying is at each end of this stretch there's a traffic light.
Yeah.
So when it's green, it's one way.
But we don't know.
No, this is what I'm just asking because power failures, traffic lights go out of service.
But that's the future discussion, Councilor Kroll. Right now, it's looking at what are the costs of some of these options. What are the options? What are some of the costs? Councilor Ladwig, Councilor Diandrat.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Ladwig first. Sorry.
Okay. Just to clarify, I'm hoping that we don't just get a report back saying this is how much a traffic light would cost, and here's the pros and cons. I'm looking for a design that incorporates a light at each end with, enabling cyclists to go through. Give me a design with those features in it, and then you can evaluate the design.
I think we're going to get fined as a cost for having that work done.
I know.
We haven't authorized that to be done.
I know.
So that, and I think that's what we need to find out in September, have a fuller discussion. And that's, I think, even stating at that point in time, here's what we want to see in that design.
Exactly.
So that, and so we'll clarify that. Councilor Diandrat? You're muted.
Sorry, to make another motion, which can incorporate, I would like to hear from TRAC what they think and what they prioritize, because perhaps there's a cheaper solution that is equally, that brings equal safety. I think, and so I think it would be, so far we received this report, but we cannot ask them, and there are no drawings. Perhaps they can discuss some.
We have two reports from TRAC so far on this, and they were at the public consultation. So we are hearing from TRAC, and as Dave said, he'll continue to talk with TRAC. That's not an issue. Okay, so I think that they are there, but they're not engineers, they're not the ones that are going to be doing the design for us, for the town. So all in favor of looking for more consideration of this issue and additional improvements in September when we come back. That's basically what we're saying. All in favor, thank you. Because we really don't know what those are at this point in time. We are ourselves still all over the map, but we do know that we want to look at this again. But the developer has to have the opportunity to move forward with their planning. So, and it's going to cost. So be prepared to spend money just in the planning of that itself. And so we'll see what that is. Corporate officer?
Yes, of all the motions, this is the one that has an action that would be advisable to go straight to council. So if I can have a motion for this item to go straight to council in the next meeting.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Dingrad. All in favor? Thank you. Was there any motions from the earlier part of the meeting? I've even forgot what the earlier part was all about. So
nothing that I think gives rise to the urgency to take them straight to council.
well, the rezoning.
3.2, that was already in the recommendations that were moved.
3.1, that's already, part there. Okay.
3.2 is covered and 3.3 is no longer time sensitive, so I don't think it needs to go.
Thank you. And Councillor, we're once again, how much time do you want to spend in the code of conduct tonight?
Another day.
Another day. So we will look for another opportunity. I did talk with the corporate officer today about looking at a workshop in September. And maybe that's not a bad idea for us to kind of consider that all in one wrap, because we have not been able to get our heads around that. I mean, and I think that it may be controversial, it may not be controversial. I don't know. So we'll wait to see. So, Councilor Dindrad?
Maybe I just would like to go back if it's possible, because one of the things that I would like, I don't know if I need to make a new motion, I'll make that in this report, staff also provides some options for funding, because we do have grants for active transportation, and we actually even have some money for active transportation. I understand that the direct infrastructure might have some plans, but we are talking about priorities, right? And I think this is important, and what other venues we could have, because I don't think we need to come up with all the funding necessary. There are options.
The CAO is listening to us, and I think that I mean, we're looking at more information in September, but it'll probably just lead to a discussion and then more direction at that point in time.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Okay, it's after 5 o'clock. Do we have time for inquiries? Council? Okay, move for inquiries. Does anybody wish to have a question? Corporate officer?
Sorry. If anyone in attendance would like to address council, please raise your hand. You're down to one attendee. I see no hands raised, Mayor Beamish.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn. And thank you very much. Councilor Dindrad, Councilor Ledwig, all in favor. We all adjourned that time. That's right.